G'day and welcome to my first highly experimental YouTube video, and to kick off I'm going to have a look at this Ekco Model U245, which I picked up for not very much, which is just as well because when I pulled it apart the first time I found that it had been heavily cannibalised. It was missing quite a few vital parts. The case looks alright though. Got a bit of scratching on the top here, which I think this appears to have been painted. Looks like Bakelite underneath. It remains to be seen what sort of conditions that in. I might end up painting it again, or I might end up bringing it back to Bakelite. That of course is assuming I can get it going. But if I can't get it going, no one's going to see this video anyway. So I'll pull it apart. And we'll see what's inside. 2 remaining of 5 fixing screws for the back panel. This is there's a plane going over again, damn nuisance. This is a hot chassis set, so the mains, hopefully the neutral side of the mains, is connected to the to one side of the chassis, so we have to be rather careful of that. The chassis is held in by these 4 screws through the bottom. Hope you can see that. And these are actually on the outside of the cabinet and contacting the chassis, so that's an immediate concern. I'm not sure if this is the original arrangement with the 4 rubber feet here, but that doesn't seem very good considering this is a hot chassis set, so I'll have to have a look at what we'll do with that. No, I haven't taken the knobs off. Okay. Just turn it around. Grub screws are well buried in the knobs, which is probably a good thing. Gee, those planes really are frequent today. It must be the weather. They don't usually come over this often. We do live in the flight path, but only occasionally get bothered by them. Alright, here we go. So pulling this out, and a few parts floating around, and I'll put the case aside. That looks pretty messy inside, but it's all intact and no signs of cracks. The dial glass is good, so yeah, I'll just put that aside for now. And here we have it. It was missing, well, the power supply capacitors. I've got this can, which is the right values: 2 by 50 microfarad, 300 volt, 350 peak. This is an old one. It's probably no good, but I might mount it in the chassis just for appearance, and possibly use the tags to mount a tag strip on underneath to fit some new ones. I'll see how we go with that. I've got this butte ferrite rod, and I don't know how that will match up to the tuning capacitor on this. Fingers crossed it will be somewhere close enough, otherwise I might end up having to wind my own coil on it, and I don't fancy doing that. So I'm going to try this first. According to the circuit diagram, there are 2 coils on the original ferrite antenna, one for long wave and one for medium wave, and it has this switch on the front which is long and medium wave. I don't think we'll be using long wave, and I don't really care if the long wave doesn't work. There's not much I can do about it anyway. The other thing that was missing, yeah, this is this little disc that sits on the on-off switch, and apparently is seen through the panel somewhere and shows whether it's on or off. Hopefully you would know whether it was on or off by the music coming out of it, but these plumbing engineers don't miss a trick and they make sure of everything. So, okay, the other thing I've scraped up is this Butte output transformer, which I hope is going to be good enough. I'll have to check the DC resistance on the windings, and I did go through and label them before, but I can't really read my own writing. So this is the primary. This is the primary, and we're looking at more than 200 ohms. Looking at 297 ohms on the primary, and the secondary we're looking at about 1 ohm. Okay, that's probably about right. I've checked it before for shorts to ground and whatever, but actually while I'm here I'm going to do that again just to make sure. Yeah, not seeing anything there, and not seeing anything on the primary. Yep, so that should be hopefully near enough. A lot of this set is going to be hopefully near enough. The other little issue I have with this, I found, is that this UL41 has gone gassy. These valve holders are a dreadful idea. No doubt they had their uses in their time. They will stop the valves falling out if the set happens to be used in a military aircraft or something like that, but other than that I think they have very little use. But this UL41 is probably a victim of that. I'm just prising off the spring clip here, which is the cause of most of the damage to them. Okay, so that's off. Okay. Yeah, I think it's gassy. Alright, now I've got to try and get the rest of the guts out here. If this chassis is filthy, well, it's mostly just dust, it'll clean up alright. Let's just get this thing off. Okay, it's a little culprit. Let's see if we can get this tube out. It's going to be fun considering the top half of it is missing. I wonder if I can push it out from underneath. Probably not. Maybe. Yep, that's worked. Lots of little bits of glass. And a UL41. I might pull that apart later just for fun. Okay, so I had labelled a number of components here. I guess I'll start with the ferrite antenna, and that will fit in here, and I'll check before that does fit. This one has 2 windings on it. Hopefully I can just hook them up and it'll work, or at least something close to working. Alright, I do have some information about the set here, and it mentions the ferrite aerial L1 and L2 on the circuit diagram, and it says 1.4 for L1 and 3.5. 1.4 and 3.5 watt. Little asterisk there. Approximate DC resistance in ohms. So 1.4 ohms and 3.5 ohms. Doesn't tell me very much about the inductance, but so L1 is the medium wave one, and it is 1.4 ohms. So I'll see which one of these is closest. We've got this one here, measures 0.4. I hope the other one's a bit better than that. One point one. Maybe it'll be close enough. I'm going to give this one, the 1.1, a go as the medium wave coil. And look, I'll connect the other one to long wave, but it won't be anywhere near workable. I don't suppose that doesn't matter, given that we don't have any long wave here in Western Australia or anywhere in Australia as far as I'm aware. So this looks like it's going to be our medium wave coil. Let's have a look at that. Yeah, that's the one. So I labelled these wires here, bottom of coil. What have I got here? Centre of coil. This one here says, I can't read my writing, top. So I think I was referring to the circuit diagram here. So the top of coil will be one side of L1. There's a connection between the two, and then bottom of coil will be the bottom of L2, the long wave. And that's where the aerial goes. According to the circuit diagram though, that is switched out when you put it on medium wave, so it doesn't matter. So what we really want are these two here. And this top of coil wire will go to that one. Okay, I'll just put a little label on this. I'll just stick them together just temporarily. Top of coil goes to that. And centre was this one, that will go to that. Okay, I'll come back when I've done that and we'll see what we do next. Okay, I'm back, and we're just going to solder up this this aerial coil. Let's just have a look. Solder. There we go. So this one will go to bottom of the coil. That goes to that switch, so I'll take that off. Sorry. That will go to the centre. This one. So much dust on this, I should probably have cleaned it off before I started. I'll do that next, I think. It's not going to come off in a hurry. end. I've got to tighten that up. Bit of blue wire. I decided to use blue because that was the original colour on the radio. That'll do. A little bit of heat shrink. I'm not going to bother putting a new wire for that. Okay. The next thing really to do is the power supply, but I think before I do anything more I'll just give this a bit of a clean up, so we'll see how we go with that. Just wipe the dust off it before I put anything else on. I think I'll take those valves out. I hate these spring things. One. Okay, and now it's time for my secret weapon. Start your bastard. I went looking for some Aerostart, which cleans up chassis very well, and this is just a cheaper alternative. It may not be as good for starting cars, but it's equally as good for cleaning up chassis, I think. So we'll see. Yeah, it's taking that stuff off. This chassis is covered in a greasy substance. Don't know what it is. Don't want to know what it is. Doesn't bear thinking about. Okay. As you can probably see that's cleaned that up reasonably well compared to the other side of the chassis, which is a horrible mess still. So I'll just keep on with this for a while. Okay, well that's looking somewhat better. Still a way to go, but I will continue to clean it as I go, and I usually do a final clean-up before I finish. But at least it's not too disgusting to work on now. I'll just give the tubes a gentle clean without removing any of the writing, and come back when we're ready to move on. Okay, well, I've soldered in these capacitors. I've been through the circuit and I'm satisfied that everything's in the right place. Checked continuity through the wiring. I managed to put this resistor just in here under the band switch, which should be satisfactory, doesn't foul anything. I put a little foam rubber pad underneath these capacitors just in case they short to chassis, because they are isolated from the chassis. Incidentally, I was wrong before. This is not actually a hot chassis as such, it's a floating chassis. Now it is isolated from the neutral line by a couple of resistors. I still would be extremely cautious with it though. I've wired in the output transformer, and I've replaced a couple of capacitors in the process that would be difficult to get at, and one resistor underneath those caps there, which was out of tolerance, and really I didn't want to have to pull the caps out again to replace it if I had to, so I replaced that. Other than that, these wax caps are still in place, and this 2 mic electrolytic, which is on the grid, I think, of, I've got it here somewhere, I drew it into the circuit. That's on the screen of several of the tubes. Okay, the only thing I have done, looking at the other side, is I have lifted that cross-line capacitor, which is effectively across the mains line coming in. It's a 0.05 UF Hunt's capacitor. Now I have heard people making disparaging remarks about Hunt's capacitors. In any case, I've decided to leave it out of line while I test it. The output transformer has the secondary attached to the speaker wires, and I've got that hooked up to the shop speaker. I don't want that to short. The only thing remaining is to put in the remaining tubes and hook it up to power by a dim bulb, and we'll see what happens. Okay, this is the point where I start to get very nervous. I'm going to plug this in, and if that bulb lights up brightly, it is going straight off. That's on dim bulb, the tubes are in, the switch is on, volume set about half, tuning gang set about half. I've got the meter attached to the chassis, from the chassis to ground, to see what voltage is on there. I don't know where it's going to float at. Okay, here goes. Nothing. Ah! Yes, something's happening. We've got no voltage to ground from the chassis. 1 volt, none. The dim bulb is dimming off. If we're lucky, it'll start to brighten up again as the tubes start to conduct. Not hearing anything yet. brightening up, and I'm hearing something from the speaker. No, I'm not. I'm hearing nothing from the speaker. That's a bit of a concern. At least there's no smoke coming out. I'm going to take a well-insulated pair of pliers and turn the volume up a little bit. I should have put knobs on this. No, nothing. No hum. Nothing. I'll try the... Oh, that made a click in the speaker when I changed the band switch. Okay. I suppose what was that?
And this might be with the support of a physiotherapist.
Amazing stories. It works.
The right is then about weaning out.
That's maximum volume, so we're not getting a lot in. But I don't have an aerial connected to it apart from the ferrite, and the reception in this shed is terrible. I don't know about those wax caps, but look, I'm going to be very brave, and I'm going to go off dim bulb and see what happens. Full power.
First do no harm, that's the philosophy of the person that's recommended the brace, so perhaps just they know what's going on. Maybe that's probably the best call, yeah? Look, Todd, with back pain, it's often multifactorial. It's not that common that there's a bone injury.
I think that's pretty good for a first blower.
And even disc injuries, they occur, but they're not as common as ligament.
Okay, I'm going to turn it off now, and I'm going to go inside and have a self-congratulatory cup of coffee. No, happy with that result. That's great. I didn't expect it to be that easy. All right. I've got all the caps replaced now except this 2UF, which I can't find a convenient replacement for, but we'll get to that. And I've been checking some voltages. I was a bit concerned about the output transformer that I put in. It seems to be near enough because the set works, but I did a few calculations. First of all, I fed 24 volts AC into it, and I got fed 12 volts AC into it, got 0.5 of a volt out. So that works out at a turns ratio of 24:1. Now, apparently the turns ratio squared times the speaker impedance should give me the plate load resistance. Now, the valve data says optimal load, which I presume is the plate load resistance, 3 kilo ohms, 3000 ohms. Working out the turns ratio, and I'm assuming that this is a 4 ohm speaker, works out at 2304 ohms. I think that probably should be near enough, but I was a little bit concerned anyway. So I've been checking some voltages here. First off, the filtered B plus, 172 volts. It's a little bit low. It's supposed to be 180 something. The plate of the output valve, the UL41, which has caused me so much trouble, is sitting on 139, 140 volts, and the data sheet says that that should be 180, I think. Just looking, anode 158, so 140 isn't too bad really. It's a little low. It's now saying 138.2. The set is powered on, by the way. I've got no station tuned and the volume down, so just to put it in a zero signal condition. The screen voltage on this is also a touch low at 52. It is supposed to be 73, so that's perhaps a bit of concern. But the thing that has me a bit puzzled is the grid bias. Now I can't see anything on the grid. This pin here is supposed to be the grid. That's pin 6. Sorry, that's minus 200. Oh, that's millivolts. 290 millivolts. So yeah, minus 0.28 volts. It should be around, I don't know, the valve data sheet. What's the valve data sheet tell me? The valve data sheet tells me it should be grid bias minus 5.7 to minus 10.4 volts. So I've been poking around the circuit here, and this tells me that the grid bias is developed across these two low value resistors, one here and one here, and on the circuit they are 39 and 47 ohms respectively, and somewhere else it tells me that they should develop 3.8 volts across them. So I'm just going to have a look at that now I've powered it up, and let me see. There's something odd here. That goes, the other side of that resistor goes to ground. Across the first one we should have just a few volts. I'll just try, I'll put that on the 20 volt range. 1.78, minus 1.78, so it's negative to the chassis. The other end of this should be minus 3.87. Minus 3.87, so there's minus 3.87 volts on there. Now that is connected to the grid via this 1 meg resistor here. Now if there's no leakage current, it should by rights put minus 3.78 volts on here, but it's not, so I'm assuming that something is leaking here. I guess the culprit is this cap, the likely culprit. There's also this rather odd 0.002 mic cap here, but I think perhaps this is a culprit. I don't know why that voltage there is not appearing here unless there is some leakage somewhere. I wonder what would happen if I snipped that cap. I suppose I was going to replace it anyway. I might just nip it off and see what happens. And I've left my good cutters inside, so I'll have to use my second best cutters. Now let's see what it says. No difference, minus 0.14. I don't know what's happening here. Maybe the tube's faulty, maybe it's got internal leakage.
George, yes, that's it. All right. Some interesting topics today. Some of these are very tough, George. I'm warning you.
It seems to be going all right. I think that sounds maybe a little distorted.
Tasmania, by the way, just before we go on, George, in relation to Sharon's issue with groceries, says you try calling the local MS society if you have one nearby. Yeah, that may or may not be useful or not. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. All right, otherwise try Woolies Home Delivery if they do it. Now, George, what do you want here? We've got heist movies, alliterative people, elemental etymologies, name that year or...
Now the UL41 I bought was used. I suppose it could have some internal leakage. I just can't understand why that grid bias is not where it should be. I've decided before I go any further I'm going to do the dial string. It's sounding okay, but I think that the issues with the grid bias are probably down to the tube, and I think the next step will be to go in search of another tube. It sounds alright, but I really will need to sort that out. So I've got some dial string. I found in my box of springs a little spring that might do the trick. And I found a diagram of the dial stringing, but it really isn't that difficult, so I should be alright even without that, but I will refer to it and make sure I've got things the right way around. Here we go. So it's got a knot in the end of it, I'll just cut him off. Gee, that's not very good the way I've got that tied on there. I might just redo that. I think that's going to give me trouble. I just had to Google how to do a clove hitch. I must be losing it. Anyway, that seems to be pretty good. Yeah. So I'll hook that on if I can. I'll hook that on, he said. Yep. And that's got a good deal of spring in it. Now, this goes around the drum, and I can't... Yes, I think from there it goes around the cursor. That doesn't look quite right. I think it must come off the bottom of the drum to that. Okay, let me just check the diagram again. Yes, of course, it goes around the drum, around the bottom of the drum first. Oh, now the spring's come unhitched. Never mind. We'll deal with that in a minute. Across here, and then around the spindle. From the front 3 times. Got this cheap set of tools free with my U-Butte soldering station all the way from China, and most of them are pretty useless, but these little forceps have proved to be useful a couple of times, so that's not a complete loss. It's one turn. A bit like sewing this. And another turn. Oh, it's raining. How's that going to go? And one more turn. Three turns is really going to load up that spindle. I hope it works. There we go. Okay, that looks alright. Now we go underneath again. Here we go, back up and back through the hole. So something slipped off there, has it? Or hasn't it? No, that's all right. Now, if I can reach in there and hook that spring on again, we might be in business. Just going to clamp that there for the moment. Oh, actually, yeah, I'll clamp it there for the moment. Dot where I need the knot. That will be about there. Okay. I'll cut this off about here. Now, if I can fish that spring out again, hopefully I can put a knot through the end of it and then hook him back on and we'll be in business. Okay, unhooked. too far. That should do. Where's my mark? There it is. Pull the other one through as well. Okay, and I'll hook that back on, but first I'm going to put a dot of glue on it just to hold it in place. Well, actually I might just run it through a couple of times and make sure it's okay. Nope. And try and get the loop over there. That looks good. Okay, so let's just run it through. It's not overly tight. A bit of slippage there when you get to the end of the dial, but it's not slipping on the way through. It does slip pretty easily though. I think it'll be okay. I'll put the cursor on, that'll take up a little bit more tension. Okay, here we go. So I'll put it at about half. Well, that doesn't seem to slip. It does seem to have a little bit more grip on the spindle when you come to the end of the travel, but it doesn't stop dead, but it has a bit of tension on it. Yeah, I think that'll be okay. Alright, so now I can line it up properly. I'll set it up and do an alignment on it, and then we'll start on the cabinet. I've already taken the speaker out of the cabinet. I'm still not sure whether it's been painted from the factory or whether someone's done that later. Anyway, I think it will come up all right. I also need to find a piece of grill cloth that's suitable for it. Now I've got the dial string done. I've decided to hook it up and give it a run before I go ahead and do the alignment. I put the speaker back in the original cabinet so I can judge what the sound is like, bearing in mind I have this issue with the bias on the output tube not being where it should be. So this will at least give me a chance to tune across the dial and see if the stations come up roughly where they should be. Starting at the high frequency end, there's not a lot around in Perth, so on that end of the dial. Okay. This ferrite aerial doesn't pick up very much in the shed either. Okay, that will probably be, I'm not sure what that is. That could be 6PR perhaps. It's about in the right spot for that. We should very shortly get 720 ABC.
Shot. And the Lions have the opening pull of the second half. They're 12.476. West Coast 8.553, 3.5 into this third term. And this is what
yeah, that will be 720, which is about in the right spot on the dial.
You never hear people brag about how many recovery sessions they do or how much time they spend stretching, and I think
and that will be 810 Radio National.
Resting is really underrated, and I think
sorry, starting to find a few more gaps.
No, that'll be 810. I'm not sure what
that demands so much of it.
I mentioned
this one
is the marathon you took part in 2013. You were in the women's wheelchair division of the Boston Marathon. When you were racing that day, what was your performance like?
No, that is 720. This one.
Reply. Ball to be bounced back in the middle. Pressure back on the west.
6PR possibly. Yeah. I think I was wrong about that other one being 6PR.
1979, it was still reeling from 2 centuries of turmoil.
Now that's Radio National.
Deng Xiaoping had already
810.
begun pursuing
He was next. In the middle was scintillating. Behind those runners.
That will be 1086IX. Very weak around here usually.
hardware, appliances and textiles. And little by little, it began exporting its own growth model to other emerging economies in the region.
The sound quality doesn't sound too bad, considering that bias issue. I'm not sure what's going on there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the set together, finish it off, and then I'm going to go and visit the gentleman I bought the tube off and see if he's got another one we can substitute and see if that changes the situation at all. But as it is, it's not bad.
Century has already begun, according to some measures. 2020 was the first time in 2 centuries that Asian GDP, as share of the world GDP at purchasing power parity, was higher than that of the rest of the world. The historically...
Well, unfortunately this video is running a little bit too long, so I'm going to have to cut it into 2 parts. Hopefully I'll see you very soon for part 2.